Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Activities for People Living at Home with Dementia. My name is Gail Snyder. I'm the Executive Director for Dementia Friendly Fort Worth, and we are proud to offer this program with funding from United Way and Area Agency on Aging of Tarrant County. And today, our program guest is Peggy Spear, and she is bringing artwork around the theme America. We're so excited to have you again, Peggy, and I'm going to hand it off to
Thank you,
you.
Gail. All right. Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Hello.
How long do you have?
Good morning, Joe and Patsy.
Morning, Gail.
You ladies got here just at the right time. We're just about to start.
Right.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Like Gail said, today's theme is America. And I'm sure as many of you know, we're gearing up for an election. So we're seeing a lot of American things popping up in our neighborhoods and on commercials on TV. So I thought we might center our talk today around two artworks in our collection that are really focused on the American history, American folklore, that type of thing. So the first artwork we're going to look at is this artwork called Parson Weems' Fable. Have any of you seen this artwork before in real life?
No.
Not in real life. I think we saw it on one of the other sessions, possibly.
Okay, so then
Briefly.
I apologize if, I apologize if you're spending time with an artwork you've already seen, but the nice thing is you're hearing it maybe from a different point of view. So you guys probably already know a lot of information about this, but let's jump to it. So what do we see in this artwork? Do we see people?
It looks like a very supple tree with a bendable trunk.
You're right. It is a tree. It's a cherry tree. Does that give you a hint on who we might be looking at in this painting?
Looks like it should be George Washington or one of those guys.
You are exactly right, Paulette. That is George Washington. It's a kid, George Washington, but only his body looks like a kid. What is his head looks like? Does it look familiar?
Yeah, it looks like an old head on a young body.
You nailed it, and it is an old head on a young body. It's the George Washington you see on the dollar bill.
I was going to say that. I wish I had. Doggone it.
You should. Just shout it out next time. Yeah, you would have been right on the money. No pun intended.
Oh,
I know, it was too good. I had to say it.
oh, I don't blame you.
So that picture, here I'm going to scroll back quickly so if you get car sick. That picture of George Washington was taken from from the dollar bill, but also a famous portrait at the time by another artist of George Washington. But the title of the artwork is called Parson Weems' Fable. Does anyone know who Parson Weems was? I didn't know who he was until I learned about this artwork in graduate school. So Parson Weems was the official biographer of George Washington. So Parson Weems is the one who wrote in his 5th edition of George Washington's biography. He introduced the story of George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. You guys know that fable?
Yeah.
What, Joe, is it Joe or Patsy that said that? What is the fable? Remind everybody.
I will not tell a lie.
I cannot tell a lie, exactly. So in the book that Parson Weems wrote, and Parson Weems is the man standing in front in the green jacket looking out at us. That's supposed to be Parson Weems. And he's telling this story that was not true. Hate to break it to y'all. It was a made-up story.
Oh,
I know. But it was written so readers would learn about the importance of truth-telling, which George Washington was doing, telling the truth to his father. And they would learn about forgiveness from the patriarch, the father, the same way that the country could forgive people who did wrong in the country. So Parson Weems wrote this tale, and then Grant Wood, the artist of this painting, painted it. So we noticed the cherry tree, we noticed George Washington's head. What else do we notice about this artwork? Does it look like there is, do you see more action happening in the back? Do you see more people in the back of the artwork? Yeah, you see an African-American woman and man. So, okay, so let's kind of backtrack. So we see other things happening. This painting was painted in 1939. What was happening? Does anyone know what was happening in the US around 1939?
They were getting ready to go into World War II.
You're absolutely right, Paulette. World War II was right around the corner. And what had happened in the 1920s, or excuse me, the 1930s?
Depression.
The Great Depression, exactly. So there's this painting came at a time in history when the US was in a lot of tension. So we're right about to go to war. We're just coming out of the worst depression our country had known. So we see things that are hopeful and that are very American. So things that make what might seem hopeful. Look at all the trees in the background. If these are like the cherry trees, that looks like then there's a great bounty for the taking. There's an overabundance of cherries and trees and green and new, which was not something people were used to seeing at that time in history. We know that the Civil War is World War II is coming. Do you notice the clouds in the background?
Oh, yeah.
Some art historians speculate that those clouds were about to roll in, sort of like the war was about to roll in. We see the two Black workers in the background. So while we're looking at this idea of hope and looking towards the future and honesty and forgiveness in our country, we still have kind of a sad and dark, again, under the clouds, dark past of this idea of slavery that we're trying to put behind us, overcome, come to peace with. Some art historians speculate. But what do we see? What are some things? This artist was really known for repetition. This artist you might actually know. Does anyone recognize the name Grant Wood?
Oh, yeah.
What do you know him from, Paulette?
I don't know. I just remember the name.
Well, you guys might recognize this artwork.
Oh, of course, yes.
So this painter was the same man who painted this painting. But this one got him a lot more fame.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this artist included a lot of repetition in his artworks. What are some things you see repeated over and again in this painting?
Well, the fringe.
The fringe, that's a great one.
The button, the bricks.
The buttons, the bricks. You're hitting them all.
The
What
gravel.
else?
The gravel here, the buttons here.
The gravel, the buttons. And look, the fringe, the cherry
Oh, the
tree.
bushes. That's before Bush was around. The stars on the frame. Oh, you didn't
Yes.
do those, but.
Yes, this is all very deliberate. The repetition of the stars. There's even a star in the artwork.
People pointing.
People pointing. You're right. We've got Parson Weems pointing, Washington pointing. The father not using his finger, but using his hand to kind of point to the child to get that hatchet back. And so I think when I look at this artwork, and I know this about the artist Wood, he worked in set design on theater stages for a very long time. Do you pick up any of that set design feel or that idea of a theatrical story happening the way you might if you were to go see a play? What elements might suggest this is similar to something you might see on a stage?
Because you're looking at the scene through the curtains.
You're right, this curtain. What about this lighting? Do you notice the lighting, the shadows?
Oh, yeah.
It might be kind of like stage lighting. Or how about that house? It doesn't feel very warm. It feels, to me at least, it feels very flat. Not much dimension to that house. So someone pointed, I think Paulette pointed out all the stars. And this painting was to inspire Americans to fall in love with their country again. What other symbols do we often see with American folklore or in our world today that really really reminds you of the US? It's a very American symbol.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What symbols do you see today that remind you, or that are very American symbols?
Oh,
So the stars might be an example.
Flag.
A flag, that's a great one. Flag.
The colors red, white, and blue.
Very good. Red, white, and blue. Even George Washington's head. You see that every day on the money like we had talked about, but that's a pretty American, our first president, right? That's a pretty American symbol. That hat, kind of a tricorn hat, that colonial feel. I grew up going to Colonial Williamsburg, so that to me is like, we all had the tricorn hats that we would wear. So there's a lot happening in this painting that's referencing the current situation of the US, the past situation of the US, the slavery, the war is coming, George Washington. And while we're referencing history of the US, we're also referencing, there's a lot of history in art that's being referenced. So we see the portrait of George Washington, which was painted by another artist. But we also see, this is a very famous painting from the US that was painted by a man, Charles Wilson Peale. He was one of the first American painters that had gained a lot of notoriety in the United States. So he has this painting of him lifting up the curtain and inviting everybody to see and to appreciate the things he's found. It's kind of like a museum of oddities, so to speak. The same way, we have Parson Weems pulling back the curtain and sharing this really beautiful, the American perceived beautiful story of George Washington being an honest man.
Yeah, where is he when we need him now?
Man, I'll tell you, different times, but all sorts of crazy things happening in the country. So
Yeah.
this is Parson Weems' fable. And we're going to jump to another American. Any other thoughts about this artwork before we switch to our next artwork?
I just think it's interesting that the foundation along here has the curve to it.
Down right here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Because there's so many straight lines, so it's nice to have that.
And that's it. Yeah, that's a really good observation. Any other thoughts about this artwork? Or
I'm curious what he's really pointing. Is he just pointing, or pointing at something specific?
Parson Weems right here.
Uh-huh.
So he's pointing. It was more of the direct way to get the viewer to look at what's happening behind the curtain. So it's meant to invite us in.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can see here with all, their hands are also important right here. And this isn't the best picture for it, but you can see here George Washington's father's gripping that tree so hard that his hand is red from all the blood just coming to it from squeezing so hard, which is a little bit different than what Parson Weems actually wrote in his book. In the book, the father was very forgiving and understanding. In this painting, it seems like he is a little more frustrated with his son or angry at the situation, which, you know, again, the tree is chopped, bending to almost breaking, but not there. Like the US was being pushed to away. It hadn't broken, but it was being tested. So there's a lot of symbolism throughout this artwork that applies then, and it can very much apply to us today. Okay, so we're moving along to, this is one of my favorites in the collection. This is American Indian Symbols by Marston, Hartley. Have any of you seen this before in real life?
No. Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, it's stunning. It's such a beautiful artwork. It's pretty big. It's about as wide as my wingspan. So if you were to stretch your arms out, it's probably about as wide as that. And it's a square, just about as tall. So it's even all the way around. And this artwork is called American Indian Symbols, and it's one artwork in a series of 6 called America. So what do we see that's happening in this particular painting? Do you recognize any of the, it's pretty abstract, but do you recognize any of the objects in the artwork?
Well, they're teepees, obviously. I mean, they look like teepees. Anyway.
Yes, very good, teepees.
Totem pole. Totem pole. On the
Where do you
right.
see the totem pole down here?
No, on the right. It's again very abstract with the pole going up the right side of the painting.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Okay, totem pole. I like that. I hadn't been pointed out for that before. That I can definitely see what you're saying.
Repetition of shapes.
Yes, very good, Gail. Just like the way Parson Weems' fable had repetition, we see a lot of repetition of shapes or symbols. What do we see? What do we see in the dead center of the artwork? Can you recognize what that is?
Looks like the chief.
So, yeah, chief, an American Indian, sitting, and flanking him on either side of him are 2 other assumed American Indians. All right, so let's kind of go back to what Gail was saying. We see some symbols, and repetition of shapes. What type of shapes are you seeing over and over again?
Oh, triangular.
You're talking about the very back?
Anywhere. So
Oh.
I heard someone say triangle,
Triangle.
Circles and stars.
circles and stars. Yes,
Yeah.
all sorts of circles.
Yeah, there's
Repetition of red, white, and blue again.
Yep. Red, white, and blue. You see it all over from side to side. You can't escape the red, white, and blue. Okay, so now we pointed out some really great things, and we'll go back to talking about those. But let's kind of place this now in the time of history when it was painted. It was painted in 1914. Do you have any history buffs out there? What was happening in the world in 1914?
World War One.
Right, World War I was about to break out, I think in October of that year. So Hartley, the artist, was living in Germany at the time. He was an American living in Germany, and this tension was rising. World War I was just about to happen. But when he was living in Germany, he was getting very homesick. And so I'm sure some of you know this, Germans love American Indian culture and history. And as a result, when Germans would come and go on expeditions in the US, they would take back as many American Indian blankets, beadwork, parfleches, you name it, they would try to bring it back to put in their museums because this was just a fascinating culture to the Germans. So when Hartley was in Germany, he would go to these museums to revisit all of these pieces of history that were from the United States. And it kind of made him feel a little less homesick. But he felt very inspired by what he saw. So while he was homesick, he was also, while he was an American, and he always was an American, he never became an expat or anything. He always stayed in America. He was also a mystic and very interested in the otherworldly and this earthly and heavenly, these conversations. So by nature, some of those mystic symbols very much align with American Indian symbols that appear over and again in different tribes, beadwork, quill work, you name it. So so someone said the circles and the stars, or the hash marks, this was a theme that he was very interested in throughout his career, or his abstract career at least. And then we see, what does this black circle kind of look like?
Trinity.
Say
A
that again.
tunnel. A tunnel.
A tunnel.
Yeah.
There's really no saying what it could be. Some people have said moon or sun, some sort of earth, heavenly body. But then if you follow that circle through, it kind of looks like it might be a figure 8. If you can kind of follow it with your eyes.
Wow.
Isn't that kind of cool? So that again is this idea, a symbol of infinity and the constant conversation between the heavenly and the earthly.
Yeah.
But then we see, now we can go back to some of the colors we said we kept seeing, is this red, white, and blue. So he was living in Germany right before war. And this is other artworks that were in that series. So you can kind of see a lot of colors. And here are some of the flags of the key players that were ramping up for war. So when we look at the artwork, you kind of see those flags. A lot of red, white, and blues.
I like that Finnish flag.
Right, and the Finnish flag
That's
kind of
like
looks like it
Finnish.
might be it.
Like that. I like that title.
The Norwegian flag, you're seeing kind of allusions to with these types of bands. The flags here, I think Janine said she saw a totem pole, which it definitely does, that alternating symbol. But then you can also see different flags of different countries. And then this, the stripes. But then he was also very good friends with a German officer. So he was really interested in military ribbons as well. So I have a picture here of this is Air Force ribbons from the United States, but it gets to that idea of the different bands and stripes. And then here you can see, while they look like flags as well, they also look like military bands. So you can see the different striping. So he was very interested in this idea of symbolism and deeper layers, whether it was about his kind of mystical understanding of the world or his understanding of the United States. I mean, American Indians are very American, and no one else, or American Indians, they were the original Americans. So there's this tracing back to our roots of who you are as an American. And then now with the world at war, who you felt to be as an American, and then who he felt as a person and his purpose on earth. So it's a deeply richly layered painting. And then while he was painting this, war did break out, and one of his good friends, who's a German officer, was shot and killed in battle. And he ended up stopping this series and focusing his attention onto a series about German military officers. And between that series and this series, America, that was like his most famous and most respected work of his entire life. And in 1915, because of the war, he ended up moving back to the United States. And he continued to create, but nothing got him the attention the way that it did when he was in Germany.
I read a while back that the Paiute Indians many, many years ago thought gay people were doubly blessed because if you were gay, you could walk in the world of a man and walk in the world of a woman, so you were doubly blessed.
Wait, so Paulette, then you knew that, how did you know that Marston Hartley was gay? Do you like Marston Hartley's work?
I don't know if that has anything to do with Marston Hartley or not, but I just know that I read that one time and I thought, oh, well, how beautiful is that?
That is such a beautiful sentiment because Marston Hartley was a gay man.
Oh,
And so that is, I mean, it's like someone paid you to say that because that is, he was a gay man and very interested in this type of mystical earth and being more than just your body. So,
oh yeah.
Perfect tie-in.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Any other thoughts or observations about this?
The tunnel's fascinating because you kind of walk down that. It's like life. You don't know where you're going. You take the next step and hope for the best, and it's dark and all that kind of good stuff. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, his artwork is very, he has a lot of reoccurring themes. A lot of the shapes you're seeing happen over and over and over again. And he was really struggling with some of the darker thoughts on what his purpose on life was, but then had these moments of clarity. So some of the symbols you're seeing here and colors you're seeing here, he redoes over and again, but in different contexts.
My first thought when I looked at this one was that the theme was that Indians are Americans too. But that was before I knew about all the flag symbols and stuff that's in here. But it's, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble today. Americans are Indians too. And the Finnish flag from races on the quote totem pole symbolizing the end of the Indian culture.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think everything you're thinking is in line. I mean, Marston Hartley believed that these were the original Americans. American Indians are Americans. He doesn't get into this idea of colonization and everything, which has a whole set of issues outside of it. But you're tapping on this idea of like, what is it to be an American? And now there's a war happening, but it's not American Indians, it's the U.S. as a whole. So you were totally on the money, Janine. So I'm sure you'll continue to see these symbols throughout the election season. You'll continue to see these symbols throughout your life. It's not, there's no escaping some of these symbols in our day-to-day. So any other closing thoughts before I leave you ladies to be?
You have done a spectacular job. Fascinating. I loved it.
Oh, I'm so happy. I felt like I talked a lot, but there's so many things to say about it.
You had a lot to say and good information. Oh, wow, great job.
Thanks, ladies.
So show this other slide with the other paintings of his real quick before you go.
Oh, sure. So these are, I couldn't find all of them. I think they might be in private collection, but these are other from the same America series that came out, and he painted them in about 2 years, 1914 and 1915. So these all kind of rolled out within the same year of each other.
So there's some real similarities in all of them. With that other one is the repeating shapes.
Yeah, the triangles, yeah, for sure.
The triangles, the circles, and the stars.
Yep.
Also the shape of how he drew the other Indians. Here in the canoes at the bottom match the ones outside the chief's teepee.
Correct.
And then the ones at the bottom in the far right also match.
You're right, great. And yeah, the stars, I think you said the stars, Gail.
And isn't there a famous I think it's an Egyptian symbol that's the triangle with the circle on the top.
Oh, it might be like this over here.
Well, all of them have the triangle. Every painting that you've shown us has a triangle, a main triangle with a main circle at the top.
Yes, and triangles were a really big theme in his artwork in general. And I know when he started turning to his German War series, he used the triangle a lot because it was to reference the Holy Trinity. And then it was to reference him, the German soldier who was killed that he was in love with or had some sort of relationship with, and then a friend of his who introduced him to that soldier. So it was to try to commemorate that triumvirate of people, but it also has the meaning of a teepee. There is American Indian, depending on the tribe, triangles mean different things. So that's one of those universal signs that triangles, you can bring what you want to that triangle because it might mean something different to you because of your religion or your experiences and how you see shapes or whatever.
Yeah, the Holy Trinity is, Father, Son, Holy Ghost in the Trinity.
Yeah.
In the
And then in, a lot of Roman painting, there's often the person who, a saint or the person who commissioned the artwork, or, saint of Jesus or Mary. And then on the other sides, there would be the people who paid for the artwork to be done. Or so there is always a way of bolstering and bringing your eye. Triangles also bring your eye up and down and up and down. It keeps your eye within the artwork. It's a trick painters will use or artists will use. So it's again, one of those symbols that it does a lot of work for just being a very simple triangle.
I did a painting one time of the triangle like that, and the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Oh, very cool. So, yeah, so you're speaking Marston Hartley's language then. So you can see kind of the military badges again, sort of like that totem pole you're seeing here, or the bands around the sun. They look like they might be military badges as well here. So yes, that certain themes throughout this particular series carried from one to the next, which made it a very beautiful, complex, and busy series. Well, I'm glad we got to chat today, girls. These are two of my favorites in the collection, so I'm glad we got to look at them, and thank you for showing me new ways to look at them. I always love hearing other points of view.
Oh, you did a super job. I'm sorry if I overtalked.
No, please, I should be apologizing to you all. I'm sick of my own voice. But next week, I'm back, and we're going to be looking at an exhibition that's on view right now. So since we can't be here, I'm going to bring it to you.
Okay.
That's wonderful,
Good.
Peggy. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you.
Gail.
Great job. Great job.
So it's wonderful to look at the different artwork that the museum has to offer. Peggy, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thanks, y'all. Have a good week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So let me share with the rest of you what's on tap for tomorrow. I can get my screen to cooperate here.
Cookie conversations.
Can you see my screen?
It says cookie conversations.
All right. So tomorrow we will be baking, and yesterday I asked for suggestions about what kind of cookies you'd like for us to bake tomorrow. Any suggestions?
Chocolate chip.
Chocolate chip. All right. That's one thing.
Your screen went away. It says no title now.
It says no title. Let's see. Let me try it again. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
I think anything without cinnamon or alcohol in it would be fantastic.
Chocolate chip. All right. Any other thoughts? Patsy and Joe, I know you don't usually get to be here on Thursdays, but you can still make a suggestion if you like. What's your favorite kind of cookie?
Can't think right now, Gail. Not really a cookie person, I guess.
Oh, Patsy, do you like cookies?
Oh, somewhat, yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah. What's your favorite? My favorite? I don't know. Oh, she doesn't know our favorite.
Well, we've tried lots of different kinds of cookies, and last week we baked lemon zucchini bread.
And it was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like it, yeah.
It was very good, especially with a cup of tea.
Yes. When it was with a cup of tea.
But I'm not a coffee drinker, so that's one of the reasons why I want it with a cup of tea. So I'll see if I can't find a chocolate chip recipe. And now that it's cooler, the chocolate chips will fare better in the mail. And we will see you all tomorrow at 10:30.